Hey everybody, it's Murray here. On today's acrylic painting tutorial, we're going to learn how to paint a sunset inspired by my latest trip to Ibiza. So let's get into it. So for this tutorial, you're going to need the following colours. They are titanium white, lemon yellow, cad yellow, luminous orange, matte orange, cad red, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, iris purple, burnt umber and ivory black. Now I've used an A4 canvas here, and all I've done, I've stained it with some burnt sienna. I've used chalk just to create a little horizon here where we're going to have the ocean, and I've just used a bit of burnt sienna brown just to create a cliff. I've got a little bit of chalk just above it where we're going to have the sun. Now what we're going to do, we're going to use colour around the sun, all warm colours, things like oranges and yellows, and we're going to create lovely sunset clouds, and we're going to go up and get darker into the painting. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a white circle just for our sun, just so we've got a little reference point with some titanium white. And then I'm just going to use this, which is luminous orange. So it's really bright orange. If you haven't got luminous orange, you could mix some cad orange and a little bit of lemon yellow, and you can get a really pungent bright orange. And all we want to do is just create a really bright circle around our white sun. So then we're going to add just some more cad orange. We're just going to make it a little bit brighter. So what I'm doing, I'm just smearing it together. And then we're just going to swap over to a larger brush, and we're going to start blocking everything in now. So I'm just using pure cad orange. Just going to create the glow effect of the sun. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to use really warm colours around the sun, and then as the sky gets darker, as it gets cooler, because there's less sunlight, we're going to use things like light blues, cerulean blue and dark blue. But we're just using these really warm colours like yellows and oranges around the sun. So we're going to get some white, so some titanium white, and a little bit of the lemon yellow, and a little bit of cad orange. And we're just going to make a yellowy orange, so more yellow than orange please. And we're just going to mix that all together, and again we're just going to glaze over the top of this orange, that we're just going to create a glow effect. So we're just trying to take the harshness of that orange out. Orange is very overwhelming, it sort of really takes away the colour, so we just want to use a little bit of yellow just to soften it up. We don't want it too harsh. And then we're just going to get some purple. So I'm using this cool iris purple, and I'm just mixing some orange and some white into it. So orange, white, purple, and a tiny bit of brown, just a tiny bit of brown. But iris purple is just a very cool purple. If you can't get hold of iris purple, because it's a bit of a weird one, I live in the UK and it's easy to get here, but maybe it's hard to get where you live, you can use purple and add a little bit of cobalt blue and a tiny bit of white. So cobalt blue just cools it down, so purple and cobalt blue and a tiny bit of white, and you get iris purple. So by adding orange to a little bit of purple and some white and a tiny dot of brown, what you can get is this sort of nice sort of beigey tan sort of colour. And we're just using that as sort of a warm grey to sort of bridge the sky and the clouds that are getting further away from the sun. So now this area is starting to dry, we're just going to go over it with some more cad orange, and we're just again trying to create the glow. So if I zoom in for you, it's easy to see. So all I'm doing, I'm just using a medium-sized brush, just with some bright cad orange. And I'm just going to mix just off camera a little bit of orange and yellow again together. So just like we did before, so I was using the lemon yellow. And I'm just trying to soften it up, you see? So just by adding a little bit of yellow, you can just soften that colour up, it's not as harsh. And that gives that sort of glow effect. So you can use a little bit of the luminous orange as well if you want to. Luminous paints are really good to create glows around your sun. It's a little trick that no artist tells you. Ha ha ha. But what it is if you want to create a little glow around your sun, you can use a luminous colour, but they're very overwhelming. They're incredibly fluorescent and bright, so you only need a little bit, and it's better to just mix a little bit with the original core colours. So just by adding a tiny bit of luminous orange with your orange and yellow, you can just make that sort of really, really bright glow. So we're going to take some lemon yellow, and all we're going to do, we're just going to create a little smear above the sun where you've got really harsh sunlight beaming through the clouds, and you get that sort of lovely glow. So we're just trying to block her in. We're not going to do any fancy detail just yet. We just want to gauge all the colours. So doing all the colours and doing all the clouds is the hard bit. So we just want to take our time and just sort of work on all the transitions. So I'm just trying to create a little bit of a glow, just sort of areas of sunlight beaming through the clouds. So this actual sunset was on a cliff top in Ibiza. My wife is from Ibiza, so I was visiting my family on holiday. So I was out there enjoying these gorgeous sunsets. It's world famous for its sunsets, you see. So now we've got our glow around the sun sort of blocked in. We've got these nice core colours. We can start working on the coolness. So if you imagine the sky gets cooler, more bluer as it fades away, you've got this really bright light that's setting. So we're going to get some cerulean blue, and we're going to get cobalt blue, and we're going to mix them together, and that creates the middle colour. So see the middle colour? That is a colour called cyan blue or royal blue. They're very similar. So what we're doing, we're just going to take the cerulean blue, which is more turquoise, and we're going to add a little bit of cobalt blue, which is more cooler, but we're going to add more cerulean blue than cobalt blue. So more of the turquoisey colour and lots of white. So we want it much more pastel around the horizon. So if you imagine the sun is going to be incredibly bright light, and all around the horizon is going to be lit up. So we want to use a really nice pastel light blue just to imply that there's lots of sunlight. So we're just going to take a bigger brush, and again we're just going to block it in. Now don't worry if you don't want to paint your canvas burnt sienna. I only paint my canvas burnt sienna. Everyone asks me. It's so when I put the light colours like this now, light blue, I can see clearly where I've missed areas and where I just need to dry the painting and just add a second layer of paint. So I prefer personally to paint on a brown canvas just so I can see where I miss, or just where I can see areas that's scruffy, than a white canvas. But you don't have to, it's totally your preference. So look, all I'm doing, I'm just getting lots of cerulean blue, a little bit of white to make it more pastel at the bottom. So at the bottom I'm just making it a little bit lighter than just above. So can you see it's just a tad lighter? So a good rule of thumb is always make your horizon a little bit lighter than going up into the sky. So if you make the horizon, so nearer the sun and nearer the land, if you just make that a lighter shade of no matter what colour, so we're doing a light blue, so we're just making around the sun and around the coming towards the floor, we're just making that light. And as we go up, we're going to add more cooler blues like the cobalt blue. Now the middle blue is called cyan blue. You don't have to buy it. You can make it, as I say, with cerulean blue and cobalt blue. Or royal blue you could use if you can't get cyan blue. And we're just going to make it a little bit darker. So can you see that colour? So we're going to strive to get to that colour. We're going to try to get dark as we go up. So all I'm going to do, I'm just going to make a big line across the canvas, just sort of that's where we're going to get darker. So we still want a nice light background. So we're just going to go back to our combination of cerulean blue and cobalt blue. Lots of white. We're just going to get a little tad darker, so just less white. And we're going to blend these two colours together. So all we're going to do is as we move up into the canvas, if you think the top of your sky is getting less sunlight, so that's why it's darker blue. So as I say, the trick is always the same. As you go away from the light, you're getting more in the shades, so we add in more cooler colours in the blue. So all we're going to do, look, we're just going to block it in. We're just going to gently merge it into that now. That colour that we've now worked out is going to be our middle colour. So we're just blending it. Take your time, as I say. You can use a bigger brush if you find that easier. You just want a blender brush or a soft bristle brush. It's much easier to blend. And if you're like me, as I say, and you do prefer to paint on a light brown background, and you can see areas that are a bit scruffy and need a bit more paint, a bit more work, you can always dry your work with a hairdryer and just give it a second layer of paint just to make it look more pretty and professional. So that's why I fast forward the footage there. So we're going to go a bit darker now. So by mixing cerulean blue and cobalt blue together, you can get this nice sort of royal or cyan blue. So as I say, I'm lazy, I just buy it, but you can just mix it. So we're just getting darker as we move up into the sky. So this area is getting a lot less sunlight, so it's going to be a lot cooler. So really easy, as I say, good rule of thumb. And as we say, we're just trying to block it in. So we're just trying to make this middle part of the painting a little bit darker. So then when we add the clouds on top, all the transitions will match and it will look like the sunset is fading away. So all these tricks, I'm just going to move on to a bigger brush. They're really, really easy. Once you find out all these core sort of values on how to paint a sunset, it's really, really easy. You can just repeat it over again and again and again. So say we painted a red sunset, you can just do the same trick where the horizon color is lighter pinker, and as you move up it gets darker red and more crimson. If you're doing a yellow sunset, you have a yellow at the bottom and it gets darker and you get more orangey as you go up. So if you just think of that, you just think where the horizon is, you want to have the lighter color, and where you move up into the painting, we want to get cooler and add darker colors. So now we're adding more cobalt blue to the mix. So we're making it darker and we're going to add a tiny bit of that cool purple. So think purples and blues are cool. They're very good for creating coolness and shadow. So what we're going to do, we're going to use that really dark color and we're going to frame the painting. So we're using really dark colors in the corner. And what that does, and by putting it on the outside edge, it's making the painting look framed and it's making it look darker. And all we're going to do is just go back to the previous color, so a little bit lighter. We're using our big soft bristle brush. So I'm just making a little bit more cerulean blue to just go back to the previous color. And I'm just going to blend the two together. See how that works? So you're just going into the darker color as you move up into the painting, up through the canvas. So we're just trying to get rid of all the harsh transitions. Now I don't know how, but I somehow got yellow on my brush. So again, I always like to leave these little cock-ups in my painting, all these mistakes, because I want to show people that it's totally normal to make mistakes. Every artist makes mistakes. Don't panic, don't worry. I've just suddenly put a big dollop of yellow on my painting, and as I say, you can just go over it. You can, if you have baby wipes handy, you can wipe it away, or you can always dry your work with a hairdryer and just paint over it. That is the great thing about acrylics. They are perfect for beginners, so they're really forgiving. If you make a mistake, don't panic, don't get yourself in a tizzle. Just sort of relax, take your time. And now my brush is, look, my brush is all shredding, so it's one of these things. But I wanted to leave it into the video because I want to show people how normal and how realistic this is. I don't want you thinking that everyone just does something first time and it's perfect. So look, we've got this lovely glow around the sun. We've got this lovely light transition going into a darker sky, going into a really dark top and corners to frame our sky. So we've got this lovely background sky. So what we're going to do, we're just going to dry it with a hairdryer. And we're going to work in detail now of adding the clouds on top. So we've done all the hard work. So now we're just going to add the light effect all around the clouds. So I'll zoom in for you. And first of all, we're just going to create a little white circle. Just so we've got a base for our little sun. So we're just going to put in a little white circle. And all you need to do is just use pure titanium white. That's all you need to do. So easy. And then we're going to get some of our luminous orange again. And we're just going to get some cad orange and make it more hotter. Add some heat to it using the luminous orange. So it's super bright and vibrant. And all we're going to do is just around the sun itself, we're just going to make it look like it's popping, make it that it's looking like it's on fire almost. And we're just going to create that lovely glow effect. So I'm just using a small brush, and all I'm doing is I'm just scraping it against the canvas. I've got hardly any water on it, I've just got quite thick paint. And all I'm doing, as I say, I'm just really softly letting the paint sort of come off my brush, off the bristles, and sort of blur into that nice sort of grey colour that we were making, that sort of tanny, orangey purple. So we're just trying to make this, just like we did with the sky, we've got, you can't really notice the colour change where it goes from light to dark. We're just trying to make all the transitions smooth around our sun. So just smearing it onto the dry canvas. And the great thing is, if you dry your work in each stage and it's nice and dry, if you do make a mistake, as I say, you can just sort of wipe it away. You can just correct it. So I'm using the bright lemon yellow. Lemon yellow is just really, really super bright yellow. You could use cad yellow. Cad yellow is a little bit darker, but lemon yellow, obviously, just like the title is the colour of a lemon, is super vibrant. So just around the sun I want it incredibly vibrant. So this is all the sunlight beaming and bellowing through those clouds. And again, by having the sun in the middle, so this is cad yellow, look, so cad yellow is a little bit darker. If you haven't got, like, as I say, I don't want people, if you can't afford it, we live in hard times, you can't afford to buy loads of paints. You can always mix paints, so this is what I want to teach you. The painting company is going to hate me, but you can make colours. So to create an orangey yellow, like cad yellow deep hue I think it's called, you just need to get a bit of yellow and add a tiny bit of orange, and that will make it a little bit darker. So as I say, you don't need to spend loads of money on paints. You can mix them yourself. You just want the core colours like yellow, orange, light blue, dark blue, purple, red, brown and black and white. And then, oh, and green if you're doing anything like leaves. And you can paint anything. So again, we're just trying to create some, like an orangey yellow. So all I've done is mix orange and yellow together, but more yellow than orange. And again, we're just trying to make some little divots in between, just so it looks like the light is shining in between some clouds. Because again, it's away from the center, it's a little bit cooler, so that's why we're using a more orangey yellow. And again, it tricks the eyes, and it just makes it look like it's fading out. Now the great thing about this cool purple, as I say, is by adding it to your golden yellow, so we're just adding some golden yellow to our purple, we can make a really nice sort of pastely yellowy grey. So all I've done is added some orange and yellow and a tiny bit of that cool purple, and what I'm doing, I'm just creating with a fine liner just some little gaps. And all it does is it's sort of like a little bridge tone between that really nice cerulean blue sky, that really nice pastel sky, and the really warm oranges. So by using this colour, you can sort of bridge the two. So it's just really like a pastel light grey. Because it's still got a little hint of that yellow, it's still got some warmth in it. So look, we're going to start building up some clouds. So we're just going to make some little clouds. As I say, we're not going to do any fine detail, we're just going to use colours to make the realism. So all I'm doing, I'm just creating little splats, just gently pushing against the grain of the canvas. So all I do, look, I get a fine liner and I just load up some paint. So I'm just going to make my brush a little bit wet, not too wet because I don't want it to smudge everywhere. And all I'm doing, I'm just pushing the bristles against the canvas and just letting a little bit of paint sort of break away. And what it does is you can just create the sort of fluffiness of the clouds. So just look, going around the edges of areas and just sort of smearing it. So look, just smearing it against the canvas. The bristles sort of part and it just sort of leaves this nice little soft impression. I think I've got too much water here, so that's why it's not taking. So that if we get plenty of paint, less water, there we go. So just smearing it against the canvas. So this cool grey is like a perfect bridge. It's not too warm, it's not too cold. Think of the three little bears. We've got the orange that is really warm, and we've got purple and blues that are really, really cool. So by mixing sort of yellows and oranges that are warm and a purple which is cool together, so putting a bit of yin with a bit of yang, we can make a colour that's slightly warm and slightly cool. So look, if you want to add a little bit of heat to your grey, you can add a tiny bit of orange. So look, just adding a tiny bit of orange just makes that cloud look brighter. Look, so it looks a lot brighter. And if you want to make it cooler, you just add a tiny bit of purple or blue and it will make it cooler. So we're adding a tiny little bit of orange here. Just simply, it looks brighter, but it will dry darker. Acrylics always dry a little bit darker. So it's better to go with a lighter shade and see how it dries. And if it dries too dark, you can always go over it and make it a little bit lighter. But we want to make it nice and warm because it's still getting some of that sunlight. And we're leaving plenty of gaps in the light cerulean blue sky, just so again it looks like those clouds are on top of that sky. So that you can just bridge these two areas together. Now this area is going to be a little bit further. I want to make it a little bit darker. And this cloud could be a huge cloud. And it sort of becomes round. We could have little bits breaking away, why not? So this sort of area is going to be the edge of a massive cloud. So it's going to be getting a nice bit of sunlight. So that's why we're going to use this nice warm sort of grey. So that's sort of the edge of the cloud. And then when we block it in with a darker colour. So let's get some red now. So we've got some cad red and we're just going to add that to our warm grey. So as you see, look, by adding warmer colours, you can make it lighter or darker. And we're going to add a tiny bit of brown, just a tiny bit of burnt umber and a tiny bit of purple. So again, look, by adding a bit of hot in the red and a bit of purple and brown, we're making a darker, harsher grey now. So because it's got the purple and the brown in, it's a bit harsher, and the red is obviously harsher than orange. But it's still very pastel. We don't want it to be too dark. If you have something too dark, remember in all the tutorials, it will bring it forward. And because we want this sky far off into the distance, like we're standing on the cliff top looking out to sea, we want to have pastel colours because we want to push it back. So don't use too much purple and too much brown. You don't want to make it overwhelming. So the same principle, we're just creating just with colour the illusion of detail. And again, by using a slightly darker shade, you can just create a little bit of texture. So we've got lights and darks, just to make some areas look like they're in the shade and some areas looking like they're getting light from the sun and being highlighted. So we're just gradually taking our time and just building this scene up. So I really like the transitions. So all I'm going to do is just start adding that darker grey to this area here. So we're going to start building up this big cloud. We're going to have a really overwhelming cloud here on the left, I think. And we can use this darker shade now to sort of highlight these areas. Still want to leave the lighter grey at the bottom because that's getting the sunlight. We're just sort of merging the areas together now. And this area is getting a little bit less sun, so these could be a bit darker. Right, so I'm happy with that. I really like this area. This looks really, really good. So we're going to get some luminous orange again. And a little bit of the lemon yellow. So luminous orange and lemon yellow to make a really vibrant colour. So just a little bit more yellow and tiny bit of white. So luminous orange, lemon yellow and a tiny bit of white to make it really pastel. And we're going to make a really bright highlight colour. So if you imagine, now we've got this nice grey laid down, there's going to be lots of sunlight hitting the base of this cloud. So we're going to use this really, really bright highlight colour to really emphasise all the sunlight hitting the bum or the base, the underneath of all these clouds. So all we're doing, look, if you think the light's coming straight up and it's hitting all the underbelly of these clouds. So by using this really bright colour, and now we've got the dark colour to give nice contrast, we can just add some highlights. So you think all painting is, if you really think of it, is trying to use the combinations between highlights and shady colours like cools, shadows, to create something that looks really realistic. So all you got to do is just go between the two. If you add too much highlights, add a little bit more shadows. If you add too much shadows, add a little bit more highlights. So we're just trying to work out where the sunlight would sort of be poking through areas. So you can use this colour, look, again to poke holes in the sky. So because it's darker than the yellow in the middle, look, you just by poking holes either side of the sun, it just looks like gaps in the sky. Just creates the definition. And the great thing of painting like this, we're really zoomed in, so it doesn't look that realistic. But if you take a step backwards and you look at it, it looks really realistic. And again, it's just through the colours. There's hardly any detail. So all these tutorials I'm trying to teach you, you don't have to be this world-class painter or drawer to learn all this. And then once you learn the basics, your work will look very, very realistic, with not a lot of effort. So all these tutorials, as I say, are perfect for beginners. So again, look, this cloud is we're going to create is sort of looming down. That edge that we just created is going to have a nice bright highlight in the middle because the sun's in the middle. And in some of these clouds, it'll be just the outer tip of them will just be getting some sunlight. And because we've done it on the left, we're just going to make some lines here on the right, just so everything's symmetrical, everything looks pretty to the eye. And then we're going to get some cerulean blue and white. If you just clean your brush, so you've gone from a cool colour to a lighter colour. So I'm just getting cerulean blue and white, and I'm just going to lighten this area up. So this is what I was saying to you, please clean your brush before you swap colours from the bright orange highlight to now the cerulean blue, because you don't want to get a yellowy green sky. So just by using cerulean blue and white, this area at the base of the horizon, well, this is going to be getting loads of sunlight, so we're just going to glaze over the top. This area is all nice and dry, my canvas is dry, so all by just using my finger here just to smudge it, we can just add a little bit of gaps in these clouds, you see. So again, with acrylics, they dry so quick, so if you don't like the shape of your clouds, look, you can just use another colour. You can use some of that sky colour to just change the shape of them, so you can just poke holes into the sky. So all around this area, if you imagine the sun is just underneath it, you'll be getting loads of sunlight. So just poking holes, building her up. And as I say, as we go up, I'm just going to smudge it into the nice dry darker colour. Look, just smudging it using my finger. So again, the transition is nice and smooth, you don't even notice it. Just to emphasise a bit of sunlight here in the sky. So look, letting the paint run out, just gently blending it. Up here in the corner, I just want to make it a little bit brighter. So when we have the contrast of this really harsh cloud, there's a nice contrast between the lights and the darks, you see. So there we go, just smudging it, letting the dry paint come off. Let's make some of these holes. So anyone who's watched any of the tutorials that we do landscapes, things like trees, and we paint branches, it's the same principle. All we're doing is just taking some of the sky colour and we're just punching some holes in the clouds just to create some realism. So we've got this lovely bright pastel white and we've got this glow around the sun. So now we're going to use harsher, darker colours to create the sunset clouds. So we're going to learn how to paint sunset clouds by using harsher, darker colours that are in the shade. So we're going to get lots of burnt umber. We're going to swap to a big brush. So lots of burnt umber brown. We're going to get some of that cool purple. So by adding purple and blue, purple and brown together, you get a nice dark grey. So look, burnt umber and this cool purple. And we're just going to add a little bit of red because it's still going to get some heat from the sun as we move up. So it's still getting some heat. So by adding a little bit of red, it just turns it a little bit more crimson. And then we're going to block in some of the harsher, darker sunset clouds now. So now we've got that sort of warm grey. We're sort of going to go to the edge of that warm grey. And we're just going to do the same principle as what we did with the clouds at the bottom. But now we're using a harsher colour. We're just going to create these really big sunset clouds. But it's the same principle. Look, I've got a pretty dry brush. I've got plenty of paint. Look, watch. And I'm just going to push against the canvas. Look, push. And scrape against it. And I'm just wiggling it back and forth. You see my brush sort of wiggly vibrating against the canvas. So look, all I'm doing is just smearing it. So push down and smear. And the more hard you push down, the more paint will come off your brush and you get a big thick chunk of paint. So look, if I push down hard, look, you get a big blob. But if you ease up, so if you ease up on the pressure and just hardly touch the canvas, you get a really soft sort of chalky mark. So look, if you push down really hard, you get a big blob like this. So it's perfect for blocking in. But if you go around the edges of your cloud, look, and just ease up on the pressure, hardly any paint comes off your brush and you can get sort of wispy clouds. So it's really good to do around the edges of your clouds. So we're just going to get plenty of paint on our brush. We've got that nice harsh cloud now. And as I say, don't worry about the transitions. We'll work on that in a minute because there's a big jump between this really dark colour and that sort of warm grey. We'll work on that in a minute. We just want to sort of build up these clouds. As I say, if you want to make really harsh ones, just push down really, really harsh onto your canvas. And if you want to make the more sort of subtle, wispy ones, just ease up, look, ease up. And it will just leave a little chalky impression. Look, and it's not as harsh. We're just sort of going diagonal as we move into the corners. But can you see now we're starting to get further ahead in the tutorial. Can you see now how the dark colours and the dark background sky are matching and the light colours around the sun and the light background sky are matching? So it's tricking your eyes. So again, there's not much detail. It's the colours. So all I'm doing, look, with a dry brush, I'm just sort of going around the edges, just gradually merging it into that lighter grey. Got hardly any paint on my brush. I'm just trying to soften the transitions. So as I say, we'll work on that in a minute. It's just from the harsh, cool shadows to the nice bright highlights. We don't want so much of a jump. So these areas a little bit darker, a little bit less sunlight. We can have a big cloud over here, why not? Just to frame her. There we go. Easy peasy. So look, we've got this nice light colour, then we've got a medium colour, and then we've got a dark colour. So we're going to work on now on the transition between the dark colour and the lighter colour, just so all our sky sort of matches. So we're going to mix some of that burnt umber brown and that cool iris purple together to create that nice grey. And then we're going to add a little bit of our red to get some crimson. And we're going to use a bit of the luminous orange, just a tad, just to warm it up even more. A little bit of the, I'm using matte orange, but it's cad orange basically. So we're just making a brighter orangey grey now. Can you see it's a little bit brighter than the previous colour? And what we're doing, we're just using that sort of warmer colour. It's like a warm brown, just to amplify some heat that's going on these areas. So these dark shadowy colours are still going to get some heat from that sun. So especially again this edge, so just like we did with the lighter highlights down the bottom, we're just using some darker highlights here. So look, again, the sun would be touching the bottom of all these clouds. So because they're more in the shade, the highlight won't be as bright, but it's still warm. So that's why we've got some red and we've got some orange to imply some warmth. So now we're going to get some cad orange, just add it to the mix to make it even brighter. Add a little bit of white just to make it more pastel, and a tiny bit of purple just to nullify it and make it a bit cooler. A little bit of red, and we're going to get more pinky grey, so we're getting sort of more pinky now. And then again, look, we're just going to use that colour to emphasise some heat. So we'll try this colour out. I'm not quite sure about the pink. We'll lay it down, we'll let it dry, and we'll see if it works. What we're trying to do, we're trying to bridge the gap between the really warm colours. And as I say, sometimes you just got to sort of lay the canvas and see what works. Trying to match a picture is really, really hard, because obviously there's no one to tell you what colours that God is using in the sky. You've got to kind of think for yourself. So trying to match them is sometimes difficult. So I think this pink works, but we'll see. We'll lay it down, we'll see how it dries. So we're trying to bridge the two together. So maybe while we've got it, why don't we do some little floater clouds? So look, I've just swapped back to a highlighter. So all you do, look, you just add the same colour that you used, and then you just go down to areas and just create some little breakaway clouds. So just by using the same colours and just a little fine liner, you just do some little splats just around areas of your clouds, and it just looks like the same colours are sort of breaking away and creating that sort of wispy clouds. So say, I think this colours are slightly too harsh. I see now it's dry, and it's drying very dark, isn't it? But hey ho, as I say, acrylics are perfect to paint over, so we can lighten it up. There's no bother, as we say in Scotland. Nae bother. So I'm just going to get some purple, and I'm just going to add some brown to some purple and some white. A little bit of orange. Excuse me, you can't see it very well. So orange, purple, white, and a tiny bit of brown, just to create a nice sort of pastel grey. And I'm just going to lighten this area out. I think it's drying a bit too dark. So again, look, if an area is dry too dark, you just counterbalance it by using a lighter shade over the top, and you can take the harshness out of it. So again, we're just making these areas look lighter. So I think this lighter grey, because it's got more white in it, it's a bit more pastel, it's a bit more neutral. Why don't we make these edges a bit lighter and less harsh? So again, look, I'm just doing the same technique. I'm just pushing the brush, this little fine liner, against the canvas, and while it just breaks away, look, we just make these edges, add some texture again, just to make it look like that light is coming up through the clouds. Just we could put some on the edges, look, just to make it look like the light is shining in between them. Could have some light coming up from the middle where the sun is. So that's kind of working, that's looking quite cool. So while that's drying, why don't we do some more shadows? So we're going to get some blue and some burnt umber. So cobalt blue, which is nice and cool, and burnt umber. And we're going to mix them together to create a really dark, sort of Prussian-y dark blue. So by adding the brown to the blue, it just makes it a little bit more darker. And you can add a tiny bit of purple if you want. So let's test this out Yeah, that's nice and harsh and dark. So if you imagine these areas of the sun are almost like, of the sunset, excuse me, they're almost silhouetted because they're furthest away from the sun. So we want to create some harsh shadows. So again, we're just sort of blending it into that area. So think of all the areas. This area here wouldn't be getting any sunlight, so it's almost silhouetted. So we're going to use the same here in this far off right corner, because this area is not going to be getting hardly any light. So again, by using cooler colours in the corners, and now we've got this cooler background sky, it's tricking the eye. So again, if you want to make them really harsh, just use plenty of paint and push down very hard. If you want to make your clouds not as harsh and sort of blend it into the previous tone, just ease up and use less paint. So look, these areas that are sort of in between are not too harsh, not too dark. You can sort of ease up, have a bit less paint, just sort of glaze the outer areas that you think would be in the shadow. And the areas you want to be in the light, look, you can just blend it into each other. Just as a nice contrast between the darks and the lights. So I'm just generally trying to create some texture, leaving some of those highlights to shine through. And then certain areas like here at the top is going to be getting less sunlight, so they're going to be more in the shade. So I've got a really dry brush, I've got no water. Let's get some paint. Let's make this a bit harsher. So just gently pushing against the canvas. So I'm almost like colouring in what we've already previously got. I can see where the clouds are and I'm just going over the top like a crayon. Let's see, and just colouring it in. So I'm just shading it. I call it glazing, I don't know what it's called, but it's basically just going over the top with a darker colour and just shading areas. And because your brush is really soft and you haven't got any water, it's just really easy to colour in. Look. So again, this area is not going to be getting much sun. So as I say, none of this is hard, it's just taking your time and relaxing and knowing that each step you have to take a few minutes and do one step before you move on to the next step. And again, look, you can do little breakaway clouds using this harsh colour. So in the sky you can just use little splats. And just a little down here as we just blend it into these clouds. Why not? So let's give it a smudge. So now we've got the clouds blocked in. And we've got this nice lighter sky going into a darker sky. What you can do, again, if you don't like your clouds, you can always poke holes in the sky. So just like we did with the lighter colour, we can mix some of that darker blue. So it's just less white, cerulean blue and cobalt blue. So we've just got a more of this cyan blue or royal blue kind of colour. So we've just got less white. Just going to mix some of the sky colour up again. And as I say, look, if your clouds are a little bit scruffy, or you just don't like the shape of them, you can just do this trick where you can just poke holes. You can change how they look. So that's what I keep saying. There's nothing you can't fix. So you can add a little bit more sky, give them a bit more definition, sort of break them up a bit. So always find if you put the colour on first, and then if you want to change anything, that's no bother. And as I say, you can do the same down below, so you can add a lighter shade. So you can add more white to your mix and do these areas as well. So if you've gone over it with a bit of the darker cloud colour and you want to make a little bit of definition, just poke some holes in there. So by just mixing the same colours as your background sky, you can always do this trick. As I say, we do it loads of times before in the previous tutorial when we paint forest landscapes and we want to put gaps in between the leaves. So same principle, we're just putting back the sky. Now we've got that sort of colour combination with our clouds. You can put back some of the sky. I'm just using a little bit of lighter blue here, just because where we're mixing colours, because my paint had dried. Sometimes it's a little bit off. It just dried a little bit darker, so I'm just lightening it up. And then just down here, we're just going to add some little gaps again. Just while it's all zoomed in, it still looks pretty scruffy. As I say, at the end, when it all takes shape, it will look really nice and realistic, because all those colours will create the realism. So let's put a few gaps here. And then all we're going to do is just get some purple and some yellow, just to make a sort of yellowy ochre colour. And then we're going to add plenty of white just to make it really pastel. So yellow, a little bit of purple and some white. And all we're going to do, just in between the cerulean blue and the horizon, and down here where the clouds meet, we're just going to create a sort of a bridge tone that's just not too hot, not too cool, just so it looks like the sky is sort of fading out. And just from around these big clouds, I'm going to take some of the lighter horizon colour, so cerulean blue, cobalt blue and white. I'm just going to outline some of these clouds just so it looks like some of the sunlight is sort of reflecting around them. Just give them a little bit of an outline and a highlight. Just really softly, I don't want it too bright. Just sometimes in the sky you get this nice sort of effect where you get the sort of the light bends around the cloud, where you get a really nice sharp highlight on an edge. So just trying to work out where the sun would sort of be hitting the base of it and just outlining it. Just using a fine liner just to go around the shape of the clouds. So as I say, it's really subtle, it's not very harsh. There we go. So all I'm doing, I'm just going around the outline, just thinking where the sun would be poking through all the sunlight. There we go. So then we're going to get some cad yellow and a little bit of the luminous orange. And we're going to mix that together. So plenty of the luminous orange. Going to add a tiny bit of white. We're just going to create this really vibrant colour again. And again, we're just going to work on the transitions and just add a little bit of sort of breakaway clouds here at the base. And then now we've got our shadow colour put in. We're just going to have some of this orange coming up here where the sunlight would just sort of be hitting the edges of these clouds. So as I say, it's just working on the shadows, working on the highlights, working on the shadows, working on the highlights. Repetition. And just up here, if you think the sun's directly below it, you can just, as I was saying with the darker colours where we were shading it, we're doing the exactly same thing with the lighter colour. Look, we've got a dry brush, got hardly any paint, and we're just almost colouring it in. Just think of like a colouring pencil or a crayon. We're just shading over the top, just gently shading. And then we're just going to get the darker shade. So it was purple and brown. And I'm just going to do the same trick on the opposite side. So we've got the highlights on the base, and on the other side, which would be much more silhouetted, we're just doing the exact same trick. We're just shading it and just creating some breakaway clouds. Sorry, it's gone a bit blurry. I think the camera's focusing on my hand rather than the painting. And then we're just going to get a little bit of red and add it to our purple and brown. So purple, brown, red and a tiny bit of orange just to make our grey look a bit warmer. And we're just going to finish her off. So we're just going to put some heat just here. Where it's got that light orange. Just blending it really slightly. So just adding a little bit more of the crimson-y sort of colour. And we'll just come down here onto the left. And now can you see, now we're zoomed out, can you see how real that looks? But there's still a little bit of a jump here on the left, just on this corner. So I'm just going to put some white into our mix. So it was purple, brown, orange and red. I'm just going to add a little bit more purple and lots of white and a little bit of brown and red, just to make it more grey. So I'm aiming for a much more pastel grey. And just here on the left, I'm just going to make it a little bit more grey and take a bit of the colour out. Just desaturize it, excuse me. Bit of a tongue twister, that one. And I'm just going to blend it. So as you can see, now we're zoomed out, you can see how the colours are creating the realism. It's no detail, it's the colours. So we're just going to blend this area a little tiny bit. Just make it a little bit softer. And then I'm just going to get some orange, just heat it up a tiny bit. Just as it blends into the orange around the sun, I'm just going to make the grey a little bit more warmer. Yeah, that's looking fantastic. So now we've got that sort of lovely transition. All the transitions are absolutely perfect. It's taken a while. It's been a bit of a hard road. So well done for getting so far. But all we're going to do is just put some highlights. So white, some luminous orange and some cad yellow, just to make a golden yellow. So orange and yellow and white basically, just to create a golden colour. And we're just going to add a little bit of white just to make it pastel. And just because we put that grey in, we're just going to create some highlights, just really subtly, just going around it. Just again to bridge the gap. So as I say, it's trying to work on your transitions, trying to learn from hot to cold or light to shadow. And then just using the combination of the two. So as I say, you always see me smudging my canvas with my fingers. So I'm always just trying to make these little transitions, little edges really nice and soft, so they're not too harsh. So I'm just creating a little outline just with my fine liner, just in between the gaps of the clouds. And I'm just getting a little bit of the dark purple and brown. And I'm just changing this bit of the cloud. It looked too weird. So I'm just changing this bit just here. Okay, it looked like I had a big scoop out of it, so I'm just making it a bit bobbly. And there we go. So we've got this lovely background sky. So you've learned how to paint sunset clouds. So now we're going to paint the ocean and the cliffs, which is really, really easy. And we're just going to quickly finish the painting. So we're going to get some black and some burnt umber. A little bit of brown just to make it less harsh. So black, burnt umber and brown. And all we're going to do, we're just going to get a little bit of a bigger brush. And we're just going to block in a cliff top. Now what we're going to do, we're going to use this dark colour to bring the cliff towards the viewer. So we want this cliff to be almost quite close to us. And we're going to use different colours to push back the far cliffs to make them look like they're nearer the sunset. So just take your time and block it in. Don't worry if it's a bit scruffy, just like when we did the background sky. We just want to get the base colour down. So we'll see when it dries if it's dark enough. I think because it's brown and blue with the black, it will just dry a bit flat. Acrylics can dry a bit flat and a bit chalky, so we might have to add a bit more black. So I'm going to put some blue in first and just see how that works, but I think we'll have to actually use quite a lot of the jet black and make it darker just to make it look more silhouetted. But you've got to experiment, you've got to try stuff, you've got to see and gauge it, see what works and what doesn't work. So we've got that blocked in. So while that's drying, I'm going to get some brown and some cad orange. So brown and orange to sort of create a burnt sienna sort of colour. So brown and orange creates sort of a burnt sienna colour. And just nearer to the sun, if I zoom in for you, we're going to create a very small far away cliff. And the reason we're using orange and brown to create the burnt sienna is we're going to create a cliff that looks like it's getting all that sunlight, so it's getting kind of bleached. And it's kind of looking like it's far off into the distance, because if you think all that lovely warm heat is hitting that far away cloud, and it sort of matches the colour of the sky. So we just want to create a far away cliff, and a little one, we could have a little island off into the distance. Whoops, I've smudged it, I think. Alright, we'll come back to that in a minute. We'll leave it to dry and we'll neaten it up. But what we want to do is we want to use colours to create the distance. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to dry my painting and I'm going to apply some straight painting tape. So really, really straight. So please dry your work before you put that tape down, because you don't want to pull off all the paint that we just did. And we're going to get some purple and orange. So we're going to mix purple and orange to make a sort of really cool dark orange. And with a really big brush, we're just going to block in our ocean. So purple and orange. And go right up to the tape so we get a nice straight horizon. Don't worry if you go over your cliffs, we can put them back in a minute. And then all we're going to do, we're going to get more purple and add it to the mix so it's more dark grayer. And in the bottom corners, we're just going to frame the painting. We're just going to go up to the tape on the left hand side, because again this area is going to be more in the shade. And then we're just going to do the same here down below the cliff, because obviously it's going to be in the shade. And again, just like we did at the top of the painting, we're just going to frame it. So now if we remove our tape, we've got a lovely straight horizon. We've got a little bit of a chalk mark, don't worry, because we can just paint over that or wipe our finger and just get rid of it. That's the great thing about using chalk. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually just use pure black, I think. We'll create a silhouetted cliff. So no other colour apart from black. We'll just use our fine liner. And we want to create a kind of bobbly cliff. So we want it quite sharp. And then we're going to have some quite harsh edges. Up here at the top you get things like nice mountain trees when you have these nice cliff tops. So we're just going to make that a little bit bobbly. And then down the bottom we're going to create some sharp edges. And we'll create some little rocks in a minute. So we're just going to have it curve round, like at the video when you saw the picture at the beginning of the video. So we could have, look, we can have some little breakaway rocks just coming out of this cove. I was standing on a cliff top overlooking this cove. So what I'm going to do, just get a bigger brush and just block that in. Now we know we're just using black. It's much easier to do the outline first, and then you can just get a bigger brush and just sort of fill it in. Look. Really, really easy. Easy peasy. So we've got our nice nearest cliff. And then we're going to get some brown and cobalt blue and a little bit of black. So brown, cobalt blue and a little bit of black. And we're just going to put a middle cliff. So this cliff is not too far, but it's not near the sun. So it's a little bit silhouetted. But because we're using cobalt blue, what cobalt blue does is it pushes it back. I'm just going to add a tiny bit of orange to the mix. And purple. So orange and purple. And we'll get that sort of burnt sienna colour. So you can either use orange and brown or orange and purple. You just kind of want to create a nice sort of burnt sienna colour. And we're just going to do this nearest cliff to the sunset. So again, just use a fine liner. Make it nice and bobbly. You don't want it all straight. And then we can have, look, we can have a little island poking out. This could be a little island off in the distance. And while you've got that cliff top in, look, you can just get the sky colour and we can just go around it and neaten it up. Where we've got that chalk, where we pulled the tape off, we had a little bit of chalk. So what we're just going to do is just get some of the sky colour. You can even swap to a flat-headed brush like I am. Just mix some of the sky colour, so just mixing some orange and purple. I'm just using the really sharp edge of the flat brush just to colour over where that chalk was. Look, just cover it over with the orange and purple. Like it was never there. So we've got our nice straight horizon. Got no chalk marks now. And then I'm just going to get some more purple, a little bit of brown, a little bit of blue just to cool it down. So purple, brown and blue. And just on the left here, obviously we're going to sign it here. I'm just going to make it with that really sharp flat edge. I'm just going to make the horizon of the ocean just more straighter. I'm just going to shade gradually this left hand corner because I'm going to sign my signature, so I want it nice and dark. And I'm just going to put a few waves in. Again, really subtle. I don't want them really sharp, I want to push them back. So I'm just putting some nice darker colour. We could put our little white sun in there. So we're just going to create a little circle. Again, just with a fine liner, just so it's nice and even. There we go. And then now we've got our sun in place. We're just going to get some bright lemon yellow. So the super bright lemon yellow. And just above the sun, we're just going to create a little gap in the sky where all that sunlight is beaming out. And what this does, it just gives you a little focus point for the viewer, so you can look straight out like you're looking out into sea. So look at that, it's looking super vibrant. So just make it really nice and pretty in the middle. And then let's just mix some purple, some white. So purple and white. So there we go, it's got this nice cool colour. Just put some little holes here. Now all our transitions are all dry, everything's looking excellent. Just put some little fine detail now. The painting always comes together right at the end. It's like a good twist in the movie. The best things happen right at the end. So just by putting these little gaps, we can make these clouds look more realistic. Now it's all dry. Just by being patient and leaving it to dry, when you come in here now and you just put these little holes in, none of the colours mix together. So it's just so much easier if you just take your time. So same here, look, our cliff's a bit raggedy. We've only put one layer of paint down. So just by putting a second layer of black, look, you can make it look much more polished, much more nicer. You can even add a few rocks at the bottom like I have. And the same with this blue. Look, if there's any bits of the canvas, we're so zoomed in, you can see everything in the canvas. Look, you can see all the little stitching and stuff like that. So we just want to cover up any little gaps that we can see. So the black cliff top makes it look really close to the viewer, all silhouetted. And then the blue one looks like it's middle. Just use a bit of that sea colour again just to neaten her up. So as I say, just take your time. You don't have to go the speed of the tutorial. You can go a lot slower. You can pause it. You can come back to things. And lastly, we're just going to get some of the burnt sienna sort of colour, which was orange and brown, or you can make it with orange and purple. And we're just going to make this cliff top a little bit neater. Just take out some of those gaps, just make her look a little bit prettier. So, and that colour, being that it's more orange, it's got more heat, should make it look like that cliff is really far away into the distance and really near to the sunset. So I think she's finished. She looks fantastic. So I've signed her in the bottom left hand corner. So you've learned how to do a glow around the sun using hot colours such as orange and yellow to create this gorgeous sunset effect. We've got this lovely transition in the clouds where we've gone from oranges into greys into sort of crimsons and burgundies. As we move away and get cooler, we've got these dark purpley blues. And then the same with the background sky. We've got this lovely pastel blue going into a darker medium blue, going into a darker shade which frames the composition. We've got these lovely warm cliffs to push that back into the distance. We've got the blue ones in the middle and the black silhouetted ones to bring it close to the viewer. And lastly, the darkened corners to frame the piece and a beautiful ocean. So thank you so much for learning how to paint sunset clouds in this sunset landscape acrylic paint tutorial with me. My name is Murray. We have plenty of videos here on my channel, plenty of painting tutorials, so please like and subscribe. And thank you everyone who supports the channel and likes all the videos. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to tag me at mstuartpaintings on Instagram, and happy painting.